Do you want more from the shows you love this International Podcast Day? Well, to celebrate, Headstuff is giving you the opportunity to get more from the shows you love with a 1-month free trial for Headstuff Plus. This means that you can access bonus episodes, ad-free listening, and early access to live shows from all your favourite Headstuff podcasts. Young Hot Guys, The Lovely Show, Shite Talk, an Irish History podcast, and much more. Just use the code PodcastDay25 at checkout. Join before the 7th of October with code PodcastDay25 for your first month free on HeadstuffPodcasts.com.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Hello and welcome to Shite Talk, an Irish history podcast. I'm going to keep this very short. This is our episode about Palestine. Obviously, it'll cover some grim enough topics, but we just want to talk about the early Irish-Palestine connections, the early days of Mandatory Palestine, and the similarities between basically a lot of people involved in the partition of Ireland, and Ireland in the late 1800s end up showing up in early Palestine. But it's a bit of a grim episode. We also have an ad, unrelated, but this is just a campaign we're doing with the Samaritans, so there'll be ad for that later on in this episode. And you know, we kind of do this episode with the same sort of style we do a lot of other episodes where we're joking and laughing and bits, and, you know, just to iterate at the start of the episode that Israel is obviously committing a genocide in Gaza and has been for, as we'll talk in this episode, you know, the origins of it go back a long way. But, you know, just wanted to get it out that we are firmly pro-Palestine, and hopefully the least we'll see is a ceasefire in the coming days. But anyway, here's the episode on Palestine. Enjoy and good luck. Yes, here's our episode about Palestine and its similarities. I suppose, you know, Irish people seem very pro-Palestine. There's been a Palestine march here most Saturdays, probably for the last year and a half, more. I don't know.
And the flag's been up for a lot longer than that. It's
flag's been up for,
yes.
Yeah. We've covered bits of this in different episodes, but I would have grown up with, like, you know, Palestine murals around Dundalk, and there's a solidarity between independence movements in the north of Ireland in particular, I guess, in Palestine. But it goes back to the formation of both states. There's a lot of comparisons, a lot of the same names, people who were in the business of partitioning Ireland and governing Ireland in the 1800s. They brought their expertise over to Palestine and the Middle East, which during the research of this, I did see a video where there was two people discussing the area, and someone said the Middle East, and this woman just completely cut her off and was like, as soon as you say the Middle East, you lose all credibility talking about my region. That's a colonizer's term. The middle of where? East of what? And I was like, yes, that's fucking, you tell her.
What do we call it?
Yeah, I don't know. The video cut off for it. There's no answer. So, I mean, it's the same as this.
She said something in a funny language I didn't understand.
Yeah. What am I going to fucking read a book? No, thank you. So it's the same. There's no easy term for like the island of Ireland and the island of England, Scotland, Wales.
There is.
What?
The Lions. Although in the old rugby game, I'm pretty sure they used to call it the British Isles, which is still a term that some people use.
Still,
but also that says British. If they called it the Irish Isles.
Yeah, that's true. The Celtic Isles.
Yeah.
The Isles of the Celts.
But then England's not really the Celts.
They're there.
We don't like them to be seen as that. The Celtic Brotherhood is us and Scotland and the Welsh lads who don't wear fake tan.
Yeah, that's true. And the Scots never done nothing bad to us ever. But there's a good few connections anyway between people who are leaving Ireland at this time and heading over to Palestine. But the first one, this is a bit loose of a connection, but he's a sort of early figures connected to a lot of the people we're going to be talking about. Robert Peel.
The Peelers,
the Bobbies, Chief Secretary of Ireland in the early 1800s. I think we've mentioned this fact before. He's the first person to institutionalize police forces in Ireland and then London. And it's from his name, Bobbies and Peelers come from. Both nicknames for cops in this part of the world. But I found this kind of funny that he got into politics. 21 years old, got into politics. He's elected in 1809 as an MP for what they refer to as a rotten borough in Cashel and Tipperary.
Oh.
So, I don't know.
Because it's where the good apples come from?
It's where all the good apples come from. It's where it's a beautiful, before gerrymandering, which sounds like a fella's name, before gerrymandering, Sounds like a man from Tyrone who sells oranges. But
how could you not trust him as a politician? His name is Jerry Mander.
But before that, whatever way the electorate was set up across the, to elect MPs between the two islands of Ireland and the other one, there was situations where an area, say like Cashel, would have been a big catchment, and then over time people emigrate or die or move to cities or whatever, leave the area. So in 1809, there was a situation where there was only 24 people eligible to vote still in the area. So all you had to do, like all politics is local politics. So if you want to get elected, you could find one of these rotten boroughs.
13 people.
Yeah.
Or 12 and get someone killed.
It's easy enough to promise stuff to 24 people and then just not follow through. But
gerrymander one house out of the village.
Yeah. So all you have to do is go down and this is before the private ballot. So it's just in a pub or somewhere. You get 24 people together. They have to raise their hand for who they want. Pretty easy to swing that into becoming a politician. So he does. So he is nominated by his dad and also by another person who will sort of feature in a few of these stories. But the Chief Secretary of Ireland at the time, Sir Arthur Wesley, a.k.a. the Duke of Wellington, a.k.a. the man that big obelisk in Phoenix Park is built for.
Yeah.
He defeated Napoleon, or was there.
Was that him?
That's what he's famous for.
Okay.
So they're good friends, Duke of Wellington and old Robbie Peel, which will come up maybe later on in the story, but that's how he gets his start. In 1812, at the age of 23, he's appointed Chief Secretary of Ireland, so replacing the Duke of Wellington.
Yeah, because he's done his time now.
He's done his time.
That's 2 years.
He's put 2 years in representing at least 12 of the 24 people of the good place of Cashel.
Yeah, plus it's in his blood.
Yeah. So as Chief Secretary of Ireland, he uses the Peace Preservation Act of 1814 to bring in basically brings in the police force. What would be called the Royal Irish Constabulary, the RIC.
For a second I thought you were going to say the Royal Irish Gestapo.
Well, I mean, maybe. But in 1829 it was the same thing for London, the Metropolitan Police Force, the MPF, and sets up the original Scotland Yard before the IRA blew it up at some point. But that's pretty much...
Great foresight to call it the original Scotland Yard. Yeah. He must have known something was coming down the line.
But that's pretty much it. His grandson will show up as an important player later on in the story, but that's just to lay the groundwork. The main connection, the main fella, is Arthur James Balfour. So he comes into the scene in the late 1800s, which is a period I don't think we've talked about much really at all. There's the famine, which we've all largely agreed was bad. And then there's the
second famine.
The second famine.
Which we all agree it was bad, but not to the same extent as the first.
And then there's and we talked about this the other day, but I don't think there's like a catch-all phrase for the period between 1916, the period from the Easter Rising until the end of the Civil War. There's no kind of...
Yeah. Well, because you'd say it was the War of Independence and then the Civil War.
Yeah, but the Easter Rising it's all kind of the same. That's a heavily focused period, but there's no term for the antebellum South or the
Yeah, well, so we have a term for the Celtic Tiger, and that was just the economy did well for a couple of years.
Exactly, but there's no period. This is I guess the revolutionary period, but then there's revolutionary periods every 30 or so years.
But there's 10 years from the lockout until after the Civil War. Yeah,
so you can push it a little bit either side, but that's extremely important.
Yeah, it's about 10 years there where it's kind of...
they call it now the decade of centenaries, but that doesn't make any sense for back then. But anyway, between the famine bad in the mid 1800s and whatever the hell you call that period, we haven't really done too much in that period, but there's an awful lot of the Gaelic revival. A lot of the big figures obviously that play parts in 1916 onward kind of get their origins in the late 1800s. There's a lot of land reform. People are fucked after the famine. Anyone who doesn't emigrate is still very impoverished. The country is on its knees after that time, and that means people are struggling to pay rent. If you can put yourself in a mindset of it being hard economically, and for some reason landlords just putting rent up every year regardless of people being able to pay it or not, that's a lot of the political factors in the late 1800s. For now, we'll talk about one specific part, which is called the Plan of Campaign. It was a strategy in the late 1800s for tenant farmers against mainly absentee and rack rent landlords, which is a great term. but it's organised by the likes of Timothy Healy, Timothy Harrington, William O'Brien and John Dillon. Those are the main people we'll focus on here. But the idea was to basically unionize to negotiate lower rents. They had put all the rents into a fund, a National League fund. They had asked the landlords for reductions in rents wherever the tenants are being fucked over by like a bad harvest, or, you know, if they just couldn't pay it. Ask for a reduction. If the landlord doesn't give a reduction, they get nothing. So instead of anyone who signs up to it, as far as I understand, anyone who signs up to it, they're not paying to landlords directly anymore. They pay into this fund. And if the landlords agree to the National League's terms, they'll get money out of that fund. Otherwise, they get nothing.
Which is a great idea. In practice, does it work out?
Kind of, yeah. Like, it seems to, again, this is a whole, we need to focus on this properly in some other episode, but it seems to, like, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, we touched on this before in what episode did I do? Because I remember writing about it and not really understanding a whole lot.
Sure, but this is like, you know, we talked about like boycotts. It's a very interesting time where it's essentially early communism, proto-communism, Bolshevikism, unionism, people getting together, realizing the power of the worker.
It's a lot of isms.
Everyone, a lot of isms. I'd say it is successful in so much as the British come down it very hard and bring in a lot of laws to arrest and disrupt the people who are organising it. So it is... I can't remember the facts. I read through a little bit earlier on, but yeah, there's like early successes where they do reduce a lot of rents. But that all kind of gets put to a stop because the Prime Minister of the UK at the time, Robert Arthur Talbot Gascoigne Cecil, no relation, I assume.
Gaza.
Yeah, aka Lord Salisbury. All right, he's in charge of the UK.
Easier name?
Easier name.
Not as good as Gascoigne.
No, but he's in charge of the UK at the time. He sees this as an issue. The boys aren't paying rent, and there's an awful lot of people, again, like absentee landlords. Most of them are in England or further afield. They need the money. They're hurting too. You know, your rent is someone else's income, as a wise man once said. But so he wants to put a stop to it, and he gets the best man for the job, which also coincidentally happens to be his nephew, Arthur Balfour. So he sends over his nephew. Allegedly, and I don't know if there's any much proof for this, but allegedly this is where the phrase "Bob's your uncle" comes from.
Mary's your auntie.
Mary's your auntie. He gets a bit of early nepotism. His uncle...
And of course, Celtic.
What?
That's how he says it.
What are you talking about?
That's in that light. That's in that clip.
What? Nepotism?
No, but that's what he says at the end of of course Celtic, when he's talking about, he's like, but St. Pat's, and how do you think they're getting on this year? They're not doing great, so they're taking a year off.
What's that got to do with this at all?
Bob's your uncle, Mary's your auntie.
Does he say that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
See, just lads like you, who only care about
the highlights.
The highlights.
Yeah.
What you want to do is go back and remember every single line.
That's true.
It's like Paddy Losty. It's not just take the shirt off Eddie Van's back. It's not just 45 pints.
No.
There's a soundboard in there.
There is a sound. Well,
I used to have it on my phone as well, but then someone pulled it down off the App Store.
I made my own soundboard during lockdown. Remember?
Oh.
During one of the more manic periods. I was playing a little song. I was like, this is actually class. And then every once in a while I've stumbled across it in subsequent years and be like, oh yeah, I was losing my mind. But anyway, you're dead right, I suppose. But who knows if this is where the phrase came from? There's a golden rule in etymology. If you don't know where something came from, it's probably an Irishman that did it.
Boycott.
Yeah.
Gerrymander.
Sure. Gerrymandering, no. Boycott, yes. Bob's your uncle, sure. Why not? But he's 38 years old. He's fresh off an attack on the Scottish Land League. So he's got form, gets put into the job in Ireland. He is named after his godfather, Arthur Wesley, the Duke of Wellington.
Oh, okay.
So there's no real smoking gun to these things. It's just funny that an awful lot of people in the early part of the story are either named directly after him or his godson. But anyway, Balfour brings in the Irish Coercion Act, aka the Perpetual Crimes Act, straight away. His first year on the job, he brings that in to prevent boycotting, intimidation, unlawful assembly, and the organisation of conspiracies against the payment to rent.
Ban anything that's working.
Nope, yeah, get rid of all that. He also gets rid of trials by jury.
Who needs them?
You know, and makes the National League illegal. So now an illegal organisation. So on top of that, he also, that's the sort of legal wing. On top of that, he also sends in armed police and soldiers to help evictions, using battering rams against small cottages, and from, again, tenants who can't pay, but instead of negotiating with the land league, which seems to be working on some levels. Balfour was like, fuck that, no negotiations. And if they can't pay, kick them out, knock the house in.
So it's no good to anyone.
Yeah. Like, there's, pictures of, they had like it's basically a battering ram with like a steel tip, just knock a cottage down rather than leave it there. They'd sneak back in. They would.
Yeah.
The Catholics on all four.
They'd sleep under a rock.
They would.
Yeah.
And they did. Yes, yeah.
You'd think, though, surely that they'd be like, just evict them and we'll put in somebody else.
I guess no one could afford the rent.
Or else,
and there's probably like,
or the Irish probably we would have burnt it down.
Probably.
If we had put anyone else in there.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah. And there's the part of the boycotts would be like, you wouldn't want to break the scab line to go in, maybe. Don't know. But
bring over a British family.
Yeah.
You looking for clean air?
Yeah. Also, it turns out if you knock it down, build a hotel there, that's where you make the real money. Or an office block. But September 1887, so a couple of months into his first year in the job, you got William O'Brien, who we mentioned there, and a local Tipperary farmer called John Mandeville. They're taken down for trial in Mitchelstown under some part of this act for organising land league stuff. And land leaguer John Dillon follows them down and gives a speech somewhere in Mitchelstown, chatting shit about Balfour, blaming him for all this stuff. And the crowd they start throwing stones at the police who are there. And they retaliate by opening fire on the crowd, killing 3 people in what would become known as the Mitchelstown Massacre. The phrase do not hesitate to shoot was the official RIC position, which Balfour defended.
Which has been was like that until this very day.
Yes. Well, in terms of where this story is going, do
not hesitate to open fire.
Do not hesitate to open fire on people. Again, if someone throws a stone at you, you should open fire into the crowd.
Yeah.
That's the thing that...
Bloody Sunday.
Yeah, but it also gets him the name Bloody Balfour, which is it's nice, catchy. I would argue, I don't want to come down to 3 people. Is that a massacre? In some reports I'd read 2.
That's, A serial killer is 3. It has to be on separate day or different events. So that also...
Either way, it's wrong.
You said it was how many thousand people?
Yeah, I know, 8,000, and they opened fire into them and 2 to 3 died.
That's not great.
Yeah, but they're old guns. 1887?
Surely, though.
I don't know.
How many officers were there?
I don't know.
You'd just assume that...
One firing as quickly as he could. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, listen, it's bad. They shouldn't have done it. But... O'Brien and Mandeville, I
could see why they would like protest if the odds are 8,000 people versus a group of soldiers, and if we throw rocks, and they have guns, but if they open fire, they only get 3 of us.
Those are good.
They shouldn't have ran away. They should have just bum rushed
that'll be maybe
they ran out of rocks.
Next policy. But so O'Brien and Mandeville, they are arrested anyway, they're sentenced after this trial, but they declared themselves political prisoners and refused to comply with the prison requirements to wear prison clothes, basically. So a similar thing we see in many, many generations of Irish resistance, I guess. But they get arrested. They don't want to be classified as common criminals. They don't want to wear prison uniforms and such. But that's not accepted by the establishment at the time. They're beaten, stripped for refusing to wear official prison outfits. They're put in rations of bread and water. This is a story that...
Wait, they stripped them?
Yeah, I guess because they're wearing regular clothes.
But make them wear the uniform. Don't be now. You get to wear nothing.
Yeah, well, pretty much. Yeah, easier to take people's clothes off them than make them wear the uniform, I guess. This is a story that I'm going to choose to believe because it sounds good. But one of the guys in particular, William O'Brien. So the 2 of them are like suffering from malnutrition. They've got chronic diarrhea. They're getting beaten down, put on like strict diets for long stretches at a time because they won't break their spirits, basically. And supposedly near the end of the prison stint, someone sneaks in a tweed suit to O'Brien. So
that's going to arouse suspicion.
Well, so basically, like at the end of the night, guards kicking him, hitting him with batons. He's naked on the ground. They're probably spitting on him, leave him. They come back in the next day to find him sitting upright, wearing a Blarney tweed suit, a soft hat, and an emerald green tie, which is an image that becomes a kind of... This is referred to, Balfour refers to this as the Tullamore Tweed incident later. But this is just used as like the unbeatable Irish spirit. You know, you kick a man, you strip him, leave him on the ground, you come back in the next day, looking dapper as fuck. He's a handsome Fenian.
They beat the shit out of him directly after.
Undoubtedly.
Unmercifully.
Jeez, you think the beating he got before was bad? But supposedly he wore the same suit. So they're in prison for about 3 months. So he's an MP. He's an elected politician. So when he gets out of prison, every time he's in the House of Commons, when Balfour's there, he wears the suit.
The same suit?
Supposedly.
So, because you'd think that they would have ripped that off him and destroyed it. But I guess just make it
at the same time, fuck him.
Fuck him. Yeah. And that's a great story.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's 100% true.
What used the Tyrrell Sound tweet? Tullamore tweet?
Tullamore tweet, because I think the prison is Tullamore.
And have you Googled to see if that's a fashion line now?
Well, it was.
Or can we dibs it?
It was actually a Blarney tweed suit, but then the incident gets called the Tullamore tweed.
Okay.
But Blarney Mills makes.
Surely someone's jumped onto this.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's a big desire and demand for very expensive tweed suits from Ireland because of a reference to a thing that may or may not have happened in the late 1800s.
Yeah, no disagreement here.
No, yeah, I mean, it does sound pretty. It does sound pretty dapper. I don't know. It's just a great image to like them opening up the prison the next day. And he's there in a hat, like morning boys, and an emerald green tie. Fucking good man. Anyway. Balfour, again, maybe we'll do this when we do an eventual series on the Land League, but a bit of a mixed legacy. He's obviously, all we've talked about so far is very, very hard on the Land League and anyone trying to, look for not getting kicked out on the side of the road during the very early post-famine times. But he does bring in the Congested District Board, the CDB, which is, you'd often see them, I would have heard them referred to as like the famine walls, out west where there's just like walls all over the place. So he brings that in 1891, which, I don't know. I read reports saying that it was a complete waste of time, and then some reports said it was basically putting people to work on stuff that was, I think, sometimes seen as busy work, but you're getting paid to build walls to nowhere, build roads to nowhere kind of stuff. Kind
of a thing that a lot of people in Ireland suggest should happen to people on the welfare.
Yes.
To this day still.
Yeah.
And people say, even if it's just busy work, to have him doing just something.
Yeah.
Because it's good for your mental... Do you wonder if he was like, it's good for your mental health.
Oh, for sure.
It's not good all day to be sat down looking at the fire.
No.
Because I assume that's their version of video games.
Yeah, probably.
But like, that was probably... He was kind of a man ahead of his time.
I think it was kind of like, don't... I think the pitch was like, don't emigrate. Don't go to America. Why don't you just build a road to Sligo? Where's the road going? Never mind that.
Yeah. What's the wall for? Sometimes it gets windy from either side.
Could we build houses with this? No. What are you talking about? Build some roads.
4 walls. We've got enough for 1 here.
Yeah. But he's kind of responsible for that, just building shit for maybe no reason. And there's a lot of, as you would imagine, corruption involved with the government just giving a lot of money and basically semi-slave labour to go do projects around the place. But anyway, he's opposed to Irish home rule.
But there's nothing out that way, sir. Just your house.
Yes, the most accessible house in all of Western Ireland. But he doesn't like home rule. He does bring in he does do a good bit, I think, to alleviate... he goes after absentee landlords, and he does bring in like certain land acts that help people buy back their land. But you know what? I'm just going to say he's a bastard.
I'm going to say he's yeah. Although I do agree with him on the whole making lads work for if you're going to be getting paid for nothing.
Yeah,
do something.
But then you're not getting paid for nothing.
Wash a wall, clean a street, talk to an old person.
Those are all great ideas. But I did find some quote from like this is his own summation of his legacy, I suppose. He said, "I shall be as relentless as Cromwell in enforcing obedience to the law, but at the same time, I shall be as radical as any reformer in redressing grievances, and especially in removing every cause of complaint in regard to land." I wouldn't lead with Cromwell.
Don't ever lead with Cromwell.
No. And like as relentless as Cromwell, it's not. He doesn't have a good legacy.
Read the second part of the quote.
Then he's basically just like, but I will be radical in my reform of land stuff, which he does. His big radical idea seem to be like, what if lads just built walls to places, and also we'll set up a system where we'll lend them money. This is where I think the annuities come from that we talked about, dev stuff. But anyway, listen, we'll have to do that in a whole land episode. But
don't lead with Cromwell.
No.
Unless, because that's a quote, that's only written down. How do you think he said it? Because he was like,
Clinton
Cromwell, but...
Yeah. No, I think he's pretty happy with the Cromwell aspect. I mean, you know, we only think of Cromwell as a war criminal because he killed lots of Irish people. But for a lot of British politicians, they would have been like, he had some things right. You know, he wasn't all bad. It doesn't matter. We don't need to figure out about the Balfour and the Land Acts, because now it's time for World War One. Put that whole thing on the shelf. Home rule, fuck it. It's time to go off and fight for king and country. And the area we're going to focus on for all the World War One chat is the Middle East, for want of a better term. So areas that were under control.
The second that you've referred to it is that, Kevin.
I don't know. That whole area of the map. I'm pointing at a map. You listeners can't see it at home, but look up a map, okay? It's the, what would you say, southeastern region of the Ottoman Empire at the time. So it'd been under Ottoman rule for a couple of 100 years at this stage.
It's weird because on your map it's a white and blue flag.
The whole region.
That's not right.
Oh no, it's plans for 2035.
Yeah. Where's Jordan gone?
So this is the whole. Basically, the British are fighting in the Arab front, the southeast area of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans have sided with Germany during the big war, and Britain and the Allies want to attack the Ottoman underbelly, and they're going to they want to work with local Arab groups to help take over the region during the war, specifically the Hashemites. So a lot of this stuff is covered in a movie I think neither of us have watched, but Lawrence of Arabia. Peter O'Toole's character, T.E. Lawrence, a lot of what he's doing is negotiating with the local groups and, you know, getting the weapons and getting them together to go fight against the Ottomans. You know, there was always a joke in the early 2010s that America would like invade an area in the Middle East, kill a lot of people, commit war crimes, and then 10 years later make a movie about how sad it made them. You know, and they get Oscar nominations for PTSD. The British were doing that way before them, it seems. I'm pretty sure Lawrence of Arabia is about how bad Lawrence felt over the fact that the British fucked over the Arabs. So
but then he was played by an Irishman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also maybe Peter O'Toole was trying to one up his good buddy who had just played Cromwell.
That is true. Yes. We'll have to do that Cromwell movie with Harris, but maybe we'll do a whole episode about O'Toole. But I did find funny that when you look him up, his Wikipedia page says he's a Anglo or British actor. The audacity to his dad's name was Patrick Joseph Spats O'Toole, an Irish metal player and football player. There's no way that Spats O'Toole could be described as Anglo anything. Spats Tooler. He's as Irish as they come. But anyway, if you've seen the movie, maybe you know more about this than we do at the minute. But the idea is to negotiate with a lot of locals to help in the revolt. And one group in particular, and this is mostly included because it's just a very funny headline, but the McMahon-Hussein correspondences of 1915.
Say that again?
The McMahon-Hussein correspondences of 1915. That refers to a series of about 10 letters in 1915, early 1916, sent between Sir Henry McMahon, the British High Commissioner to Egypt, and Hussein bin Ali, the Sheriff of Mecca at the time. Basically trying to...
Did you say Sheriff of Mecca?
The Sheriff.
Oh, okay.
Yes, which let's just say Sheriff. But basically just trying to convince them to side with the British against the Ottomans in return for being able to run their own regions of the land afterwards. So I guess this is a difficult thing when you go back to this time, that the ideas of national identity and what the Berlin conferences, I think 1880 or so, where all the powers of Europe just carve up Africa. They kind of decide amongst them which parts of Asia they're going to run. There's new ideas again, and especially after World War I, the ideas of maybe a couple of divinely appointed monarchs shouldn't just carve up the entire world regardless of the peoples that have been living there for hundreds of years beforehand. And so into that, you know, these...
and it's been downhill ever since.
We lost our way.
There used to be 5 powers that would go to war. Now we've got wars all across the world.
Yeah. This is the start of it all. But I guess at this time they're like, what if you ran the area yourselves? And they're getting filled with such crazy notions. Now, there's a lot of disagreement as to what McMahon intended in these letters. Well, basically, we'll talk about McMahon first. He's born in India, but to a Derry father. As you would imagine, every single article I read about this referred to it.
London, India.
Yes, London, India. Yeah. So he's, there's a lot of similarities as well as to what's happening in India. A lot of people move from India and Ireland to the Middle East during this time period to use their expertise in carving up the Middle East. But he's born there. He's married to another, Mary Bland, who's the daughter of FC Bland of Derriquin Castle in Kerry.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Marrying into a family called Bland.
The Blands, the Kerry Blands.
But they've got a castle.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. But they're an Irish power couple, and he is in charge of negotiating with Hussein bin Ali. So they have a long back and forth. The reasons for, again, this is too much to get into for this podcast, but there's, depending on how cynical you want to be, there's reasons for why they're doing these things. Obviously, it's useful to have local people on side for knowledge of the region if they're going to be fighting there. There's also an idea that they want to counteract the Ottomans have declared a jihad or a holy war against the Allies, and the Allies want to get more Muslim or Arab people on side so that it plays better for, I think specifically there's 70 million Muslims in British India that they're getting to fight for the Allies. And they obviously want to soften the edges of this whole jihad thing by getting more Arabs on side in the kind of key Arab locations. But whatever it is, he is making them a lot of promises. McMahon's making a lot of promises. And he says in one of the letters that the new area of Arab independence that will be set up after World War I's done will be defined as in the limits and boundaries proposed by the Sheriff of Mecca, with the exception of portions of Syria lying to the west of the districts of Damascus, Homs, Hama, and Aleppo. And then I'm going to spoil this next bit of the story, but basically the British renege on all of these deals that they make with the locals. And this is used to excuse the fact. I know, it is shocking. My British Empire. But this is used to excuse why they don't do anything with Palestine with regards to this. But anyway, this is the deal that they made. And to be fair to McMahon, I think he is also blindsided by this. And I think they say the same about Lawrence, that they are pretty genuine with wanting to. Well, I mean, they're fighting alongside these men, and they're like, we do this together and we'll all be happy afterwards. And meanwhile, the British have their own plans. But McMahon himself is from a long line of, he's descended from Captain Alexander McMahon, who was born in Kilree. He's involved in the Society of United Irishmen, and he's involved in the 1798 rebellion. He has to leave after that. But he's from good stock. Maybe. It's hard to know. Anyway. He makes a deal with Hussein Ali. But meanwhile, back home in Britain, there's a fella called Herbert Samuel, who is pro-Zionist. Zionism being an idea to set up, have a home country for the Jewish folk. And we talked about this in the Indiana Jones and the Ark of the Covenant episode. But,
And that's the only time we've ever talked about Zionism.
That's true. But the original tribes of Jewish tribes get scattered out of Israel, and there's a political push to either return them to the area or set up a new country for them somewhere, which is seen as very controversial, as you'd imagine. But Samuel, it seems controversial from a lot of different sides, because I guess, historically, there's always been... Jews have always been a very easy people to other all through Europe. They would go to various regions or countries, and whoever was in charge would say, we'll look after you. We got you, fella. Set up your homes and towns here. You're part of the country now.
But what's this? Any problem at all?
What's this? A plague, recession, and or external war? They're like the original scapegoats. Anytime anything went bad, they're very easy to blame because they have their own customs. They're just on other people a lot of times in the place. So they had fallen for this many, many, many times before, and it seemed, I think the idea at this point was the only way that would be safe is to set up a country for them somewhere. Even within Jewish circles, though, that was seen as, obviously some people saw it as controversial because it's kind of it's an easy out for countries rather than, promising and this time sticking to not rounding up and executing Jewish people whenever something goes bad. What if you just fucking got along with them? This seems like an easy way to be why don't you go live in this country over there?
Also, I wouldn't, how do you put this? without getting on some sort of a list.
I've been walking a tightrope here, so you can say a couple of words about Zionism for a minute.
You're like, let's protect them by putting them all in the one place. The people who are constantly attacked.
Sure, round them up and
put them in the same area.
Yeah.
It's like when they do like school shootings in America.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, and then that's how they it's actually they can't practice them too much, or else they have to have like different variations of what ways to go to a place, because
in case
you teach the kids the route of everywhere everyone's going and how they're getting there. So it's only the teachers that can kind of be in charge of exactly what way to go. It seems like like, oh yeah, now they'll know the safest way to get out, and you're like, yeah, but you're teaching them.
Yeah. Well, let's
put them all in the one place.
Yeah, I'm sure someone made that point at the time. It's not a slam dunk of an idea. Basically.
I'm sure loads of people were like, yeah, that's a great idea.
Put them over this giant.
That is a great idea. I can't do whatever accent. You can guess what accent I was trying to do there.
Chinese. Well, why have you decided to set up this new Israel state over what seems to be a picnic blanket over a hole on the beach?
You're right. A giant X on the ground is the perfect location.
But this early Zionist figure, Samuel Herbert, he puts forward he writes a paper, basically a memorandum in 1915 called "The Future of Palestine." So they say almost as soon as World War I starts, the Allied powers, namely Britain, France, and Russia, the Ottoman Empire is weak. We've known that for a long time. The Young Turks are chatting shit. They see the war as an opportunity to kill old man Ottoman and take all his land. So they're already carving up the areas, and people are putting forward ideas as to what's to be done with Palestine. And Zionism is obviously floated as a suggestion. Herbert Samuel writes his paper about the future of Palestine. His connection to Ireland is that he would be better known as, in a couple of years ago, on to be the first British High Commander of Palestine and order airstrikes and all that sort of stuff that's associated with the region. But he'd be better connected with Ireland, or better known as the man who signed off on the execution of Roger Casement.
So he writes just wall-to-wall bastard.
Future of Palestine Memorandum, 1915. 1916 follows it up. Difficult second album. Executes Roger Casement. There's a petition written to him. It's called The Petition to Herbert Lewis Samuel, Secretary of State for the Home Department, for the remission of the death sentence of Roger Casement due to his previous human rights work. Which we covered in the Roger Casement episodes, but he'd done an awful lot of
Congo.
Yes.
Pygmy. Is that Peru or Brazil?
Peru, yeah. Peru and Brazil, I believe. But yeah, like it basically helps topple King Leopold and like all of the atrocities you associate with sort of African colonialism specifically. A lot of the stereotypes come from what Leopold was doing in the Congo. Casement helps bring that down, which the British people really like. He gets knighted for that. And then he starts pointing out
and does something really cool along the way during all of his time over there.
Oh, yeah.
That you should all go hear about.
Go listen to those episodes. I don't think I'm giving everything away by saying he's the gay James Bond of the Congo. That was the tagline for those episodes. But really, really interesting guy. Involved, throws it all away, goes around, like throws away his knighthood. Throws away the accolades of the British for being this big human rights activist, throws that all away to go join the 1916 Rising, and then they have to basically put him on trial to execute him because he's such a big heroic figure. People put in a petition to not have him executed because, again, of all the good work he's done. Herbert Samuel says, hang him high. But anyway, that's his connection. He's the first big paper about this idea, and that paper is read and followed up on by Arthur Balfour. So the hero of the Mitcheltown Massacre himself, the old Tullamore Tweed hitting bastard, he's back. 1917, he writes a letter to the Zionist Lord Lionel Walter Rothschild, probably some relation. November
not worth looking into.
Nah, I wouldn't. It's a common name. He says that the British government backs Zionism in 1917, November. So this is the first open declaration by any government for Zionism. Also a rare time, especially in this time, that the British promise an area of land to a people and then follow through on it. This is maybe the only time. But so I've seen this referred to as like the Ur text for Israel as a state. People put a lot of, it's maybe referred to as, it could be seen as like the early constitution or founding document of it. It's hard to know. Is there a lot of videos I watch basically were like, this is the letter that changed everything. This is nothing was the same after this kind of stuff. But it was pretty important. It's definitely important enough that afterwards Balfour gets celebrated as like there's a holiday dedicated to him. It's like a founding holiday for a bit. I'll talk about that when we get to that bit in a couple of years. But it is the first recognition of Zionism, and it is the...
And what year did you say this was?
1917, so during the war. So the letter just says, "Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation." So that's the big idea. They agree with the idea of setting up a Jewish home.
Just don't
annoy anyone that's already there, and don't let that affect the position of Jews in other countries. So I'd say that's...
How'd that work out?
Yeah, that's 0 out of 2 there. In terms of the rest of the 20th century. But this is it. This is the founding text, I suppose, or the first move toward... And, again, depending on how cynical you want to be, you can see...
Be plenty cynical. Go on.
Be plenty cynical. They're very much into World War I at this point. I believe Russia's just dropped out. Yeah, November 1917. The Bolsheviks have taken over. They're gone. It's maybe a move to get a powerful cohort on side. Obviously a lot of stuff, as we were talking about, has been promised to the Arabs in the Arab regions, but that's very far away. And Balfour lives in England, and he knows a lot of powerful Jewish people that might be happy with him saying, "We'll give that land to you. Why don't you, help fight the war?" Maybe. There's also a lot of, again, I don't know if you know this, but it's a very important religious area for a lot of people. I've been doing a bit of research into it. It turns out everyone thinks that's the promised land. And I didn't know this. I only learned this recently, that St. George...
I thought it was promised land because they told everyone they could have it.
Yeah, that's why it's called the promised land. It's promised to fucking everybody. But the Arabs, the Jews, the Muslims, everybody. St. George, his ma is from Palestine.
Really?
George's Cross, St. George, the patron saint of England. I think his dad's from modern Turkey and his mum is, they reckon, from Palestine. Yeah. And then there's the whole crusades, and there is a long history of English people being sent over to those regions for whatever reasons. Remember during the Qatar World Cup,
where
those lads got thrown out of the stadium for dressing up as English crusaders?
It's pretty funny.
That was pretty funny. And a pretty bleak series of events. That was pretty funny. But anyway, so... it could be for... Obviously, it's probably a mix of...
And they couldn't even be blamed for being drunk at the time.
No. Also pretty funny. But whatever it's probably a mix of... It'd be good to get Jewish people on side. Maybe there's some sort of overarching religious reasons, because they do stick with it for once. But whatever reason, he puts himself firmly in the pro-Zionist camp. There's also an idea, I guess, that they would like a relatable... There's a quote from Ronald Storrs later on. He writes that the purpose of this declaration in 1917 was to create a loyal Jewish Ulster in a sea of potentially hostile Arabism. So, and again, a stupid thing to say at this point in time when Ulster is not exactly the poster child for, that's not going well, really, during this period in terms of settling an area. But there's an idea, again, maybe that Arab people, they're very far away, and it's easier to relate to British Jews that maybe they'll sort you out and do you a favour if you set them up over there. And Ulster in a sea of Arabism.
But why not? Because that wasn't the name for... Ulster's just a province.
Yeah.
Which is divided between two countries. Call it north of Ireland.
Northern Ireland hadn't existed yet.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know when he said this, but if it was afterwards.
Did they just refer to it then back then as Ulster?
Yeah.
But even though...
the north of Ireland is just a thing that we say to get around, say, in Northern Ireland. And it's similar to the Middle East. But yeah, they would refer to it as Ulster back then, I guess.
Yeah.
It's the Ulster plantation.
But it wouldn't have... Not all 9 count... They wouldn't have cared. Never mind.
They wouldn't have cared. Yeah. They saw that as, that's a great job. We should emulate that in the Middle East. But Ron Storrs is another character. I think he's also heavily featured in Lawrence of Arabia. Now, another key factor that comes out at this time is so when Russia leaves the war, they reveal that in the background, while everyone's being promised these different regions to local Arab people, in the background, France, Russia, and England have just been carving up the area themselves in what's referred to as the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916. So Russia leaves World War I as a parting gift to say, by the way, these fucking bastards are about to double cross you after the war. So they released all these documents after the October Revolution, and
what date is this? How long's left in?
Another year. So it's November 1917.
And so they've already carved it up, or they're just releasing the plans for what would be.
Yeah.
But so they forego.
Oh, they're already out of the war.
Yeah.
They're gone. They're busy with communism now. Yeah. So that's our last parting gift to be like, by the way, these boys,
I don't want any of that over there anyway. This is what these lads are going to do to you.
Yeah. So the plan was, again, local Arabs being promised authority over the regions after the war. What the French and English had actually planned to do was just carve the whole place in half. So I think Syria and Lebanon were going to be under French rule, and then Transjordan at the time, Mesopotamia, and Palestine were going to be under English rule. So these documents get released. That obviously sours people a little bit in the regions who are fighting for what they think is their own freedom. At the same time, this Balfour Declaration comes out that also sours. The Arabs are also a bit wary, I suppose, of the idea of this new Israeli or this new Jewish state being set up. Importantly, they hadn't been consulted about the Israel state at all. So after all this stuff comes out and people point out all the hypocrisies and the promises, Balfour clarifies that even though 90% of the population of Palestine at the time was Arab, they had no intention of consulting the existing population about their plans.
Oh, well, that's good then.
That is good, yeah. It's like, I know it seems like it's a contradiction, but don't worry, we haven't asked anyone there what they think about it. But that's the whole plan heading into the end of World War One.
Why would you say that?
Because I think at that point he more cares about what keeping the Jews happy.
Yeah, but surely they'd understand if he was like, "Hey, just placate them, plumose them, whatever." But like, just feels weird.
That's not what British negotiations are about at the time. He knows what camp he's in. From 1918 until the end of the Second World War, supposedly Jews in this new mandatory Palestine celebrated Balfour Day as an annual national holiday. And there's an early settlement called Balfouria in his honor. Yeah,
not great.
Not great, but he's happy enough with that. Anyway, this is heading in now to the end of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles. So America joins the war, as we all know, saves the day again. And I didn't realize this, but the war ends with the Treaty of Versailles. It's the setting up of the new world order after all the old empire. Ottoman Empire is gone. There's
for people who've only read books
lands.
And not listened to it before, the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah, yes. But
for all of our American listeners,
yes. But what I didn't realize,
that's the last you would have heard about it.
But the British, they want to follow through on the Sykes-Picot Agreement. They're like, we already carved that up. Actually, we had dibs. But Woodrow Wilson, America,
Sikhs or Sykes?
Don't know. Yeah, psych, because they're like, psych? You thought you're getting that land? No fucking way. But they want to pitch that plan. America is like, nope, we are the arbitrators, the police of the world. We're setting up instead the League of Nations. Everyone's going to get together and all going to be friends. And we're going to look at a new democratic world shaping the model of America. I didn't realize that the Americans don't sign the Treaty of Versailles because the Republicans, so Woodrow Wilson, I guess, is a Democrat. The Republicans are in charge of the Senate back in America. He doesn't run it by them, and they get annoyed that he doesn't include them in his plans. So he can't ratify his own big fucking thing. They don't sign it. So all the Republicans go against it, but then also enough Democrats can't pass, and the Democrats mainly being the German and Irish Democrats, because they think, well, the Germans obviously have reasons. They think the Treaty of Versailles is seen as too punitive, and it leads almost directly to World War II because they're asked take the blame for all of the war and also give every French person 10 grand each by the end of the year. So the Germans aren't happy with it, but the Irish are also not happy with it. So the Irish Democrats also don't vote for it because, fuck them. I think I couldn't really get to the bottom of their policy, but it just seems to be like, it just kept describing, there's one guy in particular called David Walsh. Yeah, David I. Walsh, who was a isolationist, apart from the only issue that he cared about was looking after Catholics and fuck the British.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's an American.
Seems reasonable.
Pretty reasonable. He's the, I don't know if this is going to be a shock, but he's the Democratic nominee for Massachusetts at the time.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a good old Boston boy. And now there isn't enough time to go into his personal scandals, but just as a quick read, it does seem like in World War II, he's very against US involvement in World War II, obviously. Isolationism, also, fuck the British. But he gets caught up in a sensational sex and spy scandal in a Brooklyn male brothel for US Navy personnel, which had been infiltrated by the Nazis.
I was only in there to spy.
Yeah. Now, that's a very salacious line. That's one sentence. And there's an awful lot more written.
Whoa.
Fuck, right. Well, I might circle back to David Walsh at some point, but yeah, anyway. So, I didn't realize that about the Treaty of Versailles, that the Americans, they basically just, like, this is their big, like, they don't join the League of Nations.
They set it up and then...
Yeah, they have to set up and he has to be like, all right, sorry, actually, my mom won't let me play, so I'm not allowed out. So, now that he's gone, the British and the French are like, well, we did have a backup plan. The British and the French go back to plan B, which is just split the land up between the two of us. Now, the League of Nations wants to introduce a series of what's referred to as mandates in the region, with the idea being I think it's kind of like training wheels for new democratic states. So there's the new countries are set up after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and they are meant to be looked after by the big powers of Europe, namely France and England, and they're meant to be looked after until they can set up by themselves. And so, yeah, this is where France gets Lebanon and Syria, and England gets what's referred to as Transjordan at the time, Mesopotamia, which would become Iraq, and the Mandatory Palestine. So they're trusted with Mandatory Palestine, and they heavily incorporate the Balfour Declaration into their running of the region. So this is all after World War I. It's set up in 1920, but they follow through with the Zionist plan. And with that, there's about 35,000 Jewish settlers arrived between 1919 and 1923. So this is the first kind of big influx. There would have been, Christians, Muslims, Jews in the region already, but this is the big early influx of Jews at this point. And here's where we get back to the Irish connections. Some of the old boys who, running concurrently with all this stuff that we've covered in many episodes over the summer, is the 1916 Rising, the Irish War of Independence, the Anglo-Irish Treaty. All this stuff's happening in Ireland at the time. And
God, you're right. It would be easier to just, if we had a name for that decade.
Yeah, it's an important decade that doesn't have a catchy title.
Send in your ideas.
Yeah. But there's many effects that come out of that. It sets up a lot of different things in the country for the next 100 years. A big one that isn't talked about, a lot of boys are out of a job. Mostly RIC officers, the black and tans and the auxiliaries. They, for reasons that are pretty obvious, didn't want to hang around the country where they'd been up to their antics. So they were looking to get out of Dodge. But we'll talk about a couple of people specifically. There's Henry Tudor. Now, out of spite, I did take out, by this point of the story, I was getting too riled up, and a lot of them are lords or sirs, and I kind of just left all that out when I wrote the script.
But thankfully, this guy's name is Tudor, so we
know which side he's on. Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone's getting spitting out their cups of tea because I'm not giving them their proper addresses, I don't know. Fuck them, I'd say. But
yeah, who's there?
I don't know. I don't know who listens to this podcast. Yeah, we get a lot of listeners in Windsor. So he's Henry Tudor.
Just reminding themselves of the good old times.
Henry Tudor is a close personal friend of Winston Churchill, another fella who is involved in a lot of these different stories, but he's a good military man. He's a hero of the Boer War, World War One. He's gone through all these military excursions for the British, and as a gift, as a kind of like cushy job to see him into retirement, they assign him as a police officer of the Irish state in 1920. So this is right into the middle of the shit of it. And like reading, it's hard to know where these like press releases or like, PTSD hadn't been discovered yet, but reading his reaction to getting this job, it's a lot of like, and he's gunning for another fight, and he's delighted to get back into the thick of the action again. He's been at the front line of wars for about 20 years now. He's never had any police experience, is a key thing for this part of the story, but they put him in charge of the police in Ireland during a very dodgy time.
Yeah. What?
But luckily,
army life, 20 years.
Yeah,
he's on the front line. Yeah, and then they're like, let's see how he does with the public.
Yeah, what you need really, policing, it's a diplomacy game. So if we get a fella who has murdered men with his bare hands and has been sleeping in trenches for the last couple of years, get him in, see what he does. Maybe just to balance him out, we'll give him some help. They send in another guy from similar stock, but Ormond O'Winter. He is appointed as Chief of Intelligence in Dublin Castle. So he's the kind of second in command. Same kind of idea. He's been through like World War I and a lot of military excursions. Now, I think basically Henry Tudor said that he wasn't given an explicit brief as to what he was meant to be at. So he takes it upon himself to coordinate the Royal Irish Constabulary, the RIC, the Dublin Metropolitan Police, the DMP, and the auxiliaries. He takes all that under his control. And then later the Black and Tans. So he's kind of in charge of that. His second in command then, Ormond O'Winters, he's in charge of the Cairo gang, and then later the IGO gang, or the Ego gang. So it's a lot of big names of all the bad stuff. Yes, yeah. All the heavy hitters, all the big names of all the bad men.
History won't look kind on him.
Yeah, but at the end of the War of Independence, with the Anglo-Irish Peace Treaty, all these boys are out of a job. And we mentioned it briefly, I think, in the Collins episode, that a lot of the Black and Tans, the RAC people, they get moved over to Mandatory Palestine. Job's a good one as far as Lloyd George and Churchill are concerned. They've partitioned Ireland. They've sent a load of men around to commit atrocities in rural regions of the country. They figure, they've proved their mettle.
Send them out to somewhere with...
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. These groups get disbanded as part of the peace treaty, and a lot of them don't want to be hanging around the country where they committed war crimes. So,
but at least this time their uniforms are apt to the geolocation that they're in.
That's true. Yeah. If you thought the Black and Tans were bad before, now think about what happens when you can't see them. Get them camouflaged into the region, and add on about 30 degrees of heat. Then see what happens.
It's just red faces.
Yeah. So there's some quotes here from Dr. Brian Hughes, who is a lecturer of history in University of Limerick. He said that there's a newly formed police force in the north of Ireland as part of this negotiation, the RUC, the Royal Ulster Constabulary. That was an option for some of these old police officers, but in Britain they weren't looking for RIC men, partly because the sort of policing they were doing in Ireland wasn't seen as the same kind needed here.
Uncouth.
Yeah. So they're like, but that, it seems
we'd like you to not shoot our old people in cold blood.
Sure. So even at the time, I guess you can't look back at this and be like, well, they didn't know it was wartime. People didn't know the true horrors of the Black and Tans. They're specifically not recruiting them for the police force they're setting up the north because these men are lunatics.
Because of mental health problems.
Yes. And they kind of lean into the fact that they have this reputation when they send them over to Palestine. They use the fact that they're, associated with the burning of Cork and like retaliation, murders and executions, all this sort of stuff. That is seen as a benefit.
That's a positive thing.
Yes. So Henry Tudor, who
you think they've got hot heads now? Wait till they're in 50-degree weather.
Yes, but so Tudor, who he had been the chief of police, he's given the senior position in Palestine over the police there. So he's done a good job with the boys. I'm not entirely sure what he achieved, if anything. He would have only been there from May until about a year and a half, during which time it's a lot of pretty resounding defeats for British forces in Ireland, I would say, especially the police force. Like the police force gets infiltrated, the spy network gets infiltrated. But anyway, they decide to reward him by sending him over to Palestine. He does see it as a reward. He refers to it as a rest cure after Ireland for him and the former RIC men.
Right.
So it's a chance to put your feet up, bit of peace and quiet, or. He specifically petitioned for Ormond, so his second in command, who'd been in charge of the spy rings, who'd, been the go-between for the Cairo gang and stuff. He asked for him to be his deputy chief police in Palestine. But I couldn't really figure this out, but the brass didn't like him. The War Office vetoed him, basically, because I think they had it out from he'd passed over their preferred choice for the police job in Ireland, Colonel Walter Wilson. Yeah, he'd taken it right out of the devil's jaws.
He's got too many connections. Classic nepotism.
With the guy who he stole the job from, I assume this is the same guy, or else it's just another Lieutenant Colonel Walter Wilson, but he was an English rugby player. He capped out for England twice in 1907, the Home Nations games against Ireland and Scotland.
I was behind him until now.
And he was Christopher Lee's cousin.
Oh.
Yes. So there you go. Winter's Sauron.
Sauron.
Yes. Yeah. It was his cousin. But anyway, Winters doesn't get the job for whatever reason, and he quits the army in 1924, so a little bit after this, and he heads off to join the British Fascist Party. So that's the kind of ilk of people that they're sending over to Palestine.
Yeah, and remember the time period.
Yeah, and that was one of the recruiting.
British fascists.
Are you seen as too much of a loose cannon and a lunatic to be sent to mandatory Palestine? What about fascism? Which also, I mean, there's a lot of ideas. I think I have it written down later in this, but like early fascism, Mussolini, I think, is in charge by 1925. And naturally enough, to the British forces in Palestine, they're starting to look at that and think, he's got some good ideas. Now, in April 1922, about 750 or so members of the disbanded Irish police force disembarked at the port of Haifa in Palestine. Many of them were former auxiliaries and black and tans, and about 40% of them were Irish-born officers. So they're all now in Palestine. And we're going to talk about one guy in particular, I guess, for this next bit. One officer in particular, Douglas Valder Duff. So finally, the hero of the piece. He was born in Argentina, is the godson of Roger Casement, which is irrelevant to the story based on his politics, but an interesting...
Oh.
Someone told me in a pub, actually, I don't know if we ended up putting this in the episodes.
That's a great line.
I don't know if I put this in the episodes or not, but someone said that their grandmother's godfather was Eamon de Valera, and that was a common thing at the time, just to pick someone famous as your godparent.
Oh. So
maybe that's what's happening in the story.
Someone once told me that Enda Kenny hadn't been back to his constituency for over 20 years.
Yeah, I know. And I haven't seen him in Mayo since. So at 13, he's sent to sea on a cadet ship, the HMS Conway. By 15, he served in World War One. He lied about his age to get in. At 16...
They thought he was only 40.
At 16, his ship is torpedoed by a German submarine. So he's one of only 2 survivors on a crew of 38. He's left adrift on sea afterwards, gets picked up by a French ship, and they let him relax a bit at home, in his family home in Ireland, recover and recuperate.
I wouldn't trust him.
Why?
If everyone else died, there's only one of 2 guys who left. I'd find them be like, you did it, didn't you?
You torpedoed.
You sunk your own ship.
Yeah.
I know you're here telling me this crazy story.
Just so you can go and lie at home for a while. Because he doesn't get to stay at home for long. He's sent back into the war. Back off to sea. There's more German U-boats. This time he's stationed over in the Black Sea. In his diaries, he described this whole tumultuous period of his life as indescribable.
Oh.
And then that was it. Which is one of the rare occasions where I've seen... He just meant it is indescribable. No further questions. Moved on to the next bit. So
it was class.
Yeah, best days of my life. Him and that other guy who got stranded at sea, they still keep in touch. But after the war, he joins a monastery. Apparently, during his first shipwreck, I think I'd left out 1 or 2 other shipwrecks. One anyway. But anyway, during that torpedo shipwreck.
Once you've survived one, you've survived them
all the same. There'll be a French boat coming along any second now. But he made a vow to God to offer up his life in servitude if he could survive that shipwreck.
And then he followed through on it.
He followed through after the war. So I guess he goes back to the war, but then afterwards he does. He joins the monastery. He gives up his life of wicked ways and gives over to servitude of the Lord for about 2 years. I think it was 22 months, and then he quits. He says that he dislikes the discipline and he resented making the vow of celibacy. Those are big hang-ups.
That was, yeah.
I don't mind the churchhood other than the fact that I have to do what they say and they won't let me fuck anyone. So he's back out again. And, from one monastery, in a way, to another. He joins up with the RIC, maybe as an auxiliary, and potentially as a member of the Black and Tans. So he's swung very much the other way.
His godfather would be proud.
Yeah. Well, it did. Yeah, this subsequently, his godfather would have been tried to fight for the country and then executed by Samuel Herbert or whatever the hell that guy's name was.
Would he have turned at this stage?
Maybe he went. Yeah, like he's overcompensating by going so far the other way. Now, not all the RSC men are bad. This is why Oliver Flanagan wanted to, give a day of memorial for them or something. Remember that for like 10 minutes, he was like, what if we had a day of recognition for all of the RSC officers? And then everyone was like, do you mean the Black and Tans? He was like, no further questions. I'll see myself out. Goodbye. Vote for the Gill. So He's involved in the IRC during, again, this period, the Anglo-Irish Treaty period. Supposedly, he says, anyway, while off duty, he claims to have confronted the man that he suspected as being the IRA leader, Michael Collins. He starts to really suspect it is Collins. Collins maybe lets on that he knows this guy's on to him, but Douglas hasn't got his gun. And supposedly Collins starts pointing to some big men who are standing around and implies that they're all his bodyguards and that they'd kill Douglas if he tried to take him in. So he just walked away.
What if I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
He's going to point at big men and be like,
yeah,
that's my bodyguard. And then that big man will look over at me because I'm pointing at him.
Exactly.
And you'd be like, see?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that, like, he's just pointing at big men around the place, winking at them. He's like, but Douglas thinks they're squaring up at him, and then...
And he said that in his diary? Or where did he...
Yes. So,
I wouldn't be admitting to that.
Well, Douglas writes an awful lot of books afterwards. He, like, an awful lot of, like, spy novels and semi-history stuff, and then his own... He writes 3 biographies, I think.
But couldn't describe that period of his life as anything other than
indescribable. Yeah, what other word could you use to sum up, torpedoes and warfare? But... He's stationed in Galway in 1921, but after the truce, he joins up with a lot of the other people heading over to Palestine. There he rises through the ranks. He becomes an inspector in the Palestine forces, then a superintendent, then eventually commander of police in Jerusalem. Now, this is similar maybe to the etymology of Bob's your uncle. Some people say that to duff people up comes from Douglas Duff because of his heavy-handed attitude towards policing in the Mandatory Palestine.
And that's a term I've heard of before.
Yeah, it's like give someone a good duffing. Here that would mean something else, but in England I think it's like to beat someone up.
A dust up.
A dust up, yeah, but a duff. A duff. It's the sort of thing you'd read in the Dandy or the Beano. Yeah, but that was just Damien Duff gotten.
Yeah, it happened.
Got so many people pregnant
after 2002, of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but this is doesn't matter if we've heard the phrase before because this is almost definitely not where it comes from. But at the same time. Maybe. He writes a lot of stuff about this time that kind of gives an insight into... Because we talked a lot about the Black and Tans during those other episodes, but I don't think we ever really give... I don't think we went into too much detail of how...
You're right, Kev. We never gave them their flowers.
No, I think these are very, very...
They're red flowers with a little black bark in the middle of it.
These are, by and large, very angry and very damaged men who are just going from... more bad situation to bad situation.
You're right. We should give them a Memorial Day.
Yeah. But bring back Balfour Day. That's what I'd said. So referring to the Palestinians of Haifa, Duff writes, had our Arabic been better, we might have sympathized with them, though I doubt it. For most of us, we're so infected by the sense of our own superiority over these lesser breeds that we scarcely regarded these people as human. So that's kind of the attitude he's going into it with. I suppose, again, like the atrocities they committed on people who, by and large, in Ireland would have spoke the same language and looked very similar.
Yeah.
Some of the same sort of like DNA stock. You take those people, then add in more racism and let them loose.
And they've already shot those people now.
Yes.
And they've already justified that to themselves.
Sure.
Now send them off to people who...
Yeah. There's almost a kind of, as well... Like it's a filtering system of the people who, a lot of the people who would have left would have been the people who would have been like really needed to get out of Ireland because of all of the crimes they committed. But those people are over there now. So he would say that police officers in vehicles would try to knock down Arabs as running over an Arab is the same as a dog in England, except we do not report it. So he says at least in England you'd phone someone that you killed a dog.
No, what he said there is in England we try to drive over dogs. But if we do... we'll call the owner.
That's true. Yeah, well, maybe they were up to that as well. I mean, it's the Black and Tans. But he went on to say, our attitude was that of Britons of the Diamond Jubilee era. To us, all non-Europeans were wogs, and Western non-Britons only slightly more worthy. When one of the Nablus detachment produced an old cigarette tin containing the brains of a man whose skull he had splintered with his rifle butt, I felt physically sick. The sight of that grog-blossomed face of the gendarme with his can half full of human brains, proudly brandishing his smashed rifle butt as proof of his prowess, altered something inside of me. People who owned skins other than pink Western ones became human beings. Which is a good realization.
And all it took was...
Yeah, the man, a drunk... That's a beautiful description of a grog-blossomed face. But that's not the sort of realization that a man who's been through, I think at this point, well... many years of heavy conflict and armed warfare to eventually...
How old is he at this stage?
I don't know. I don't know when that goes from, but like, yeah, he's in. At least at this stage, I think he's like in charge.
But he was in war since he was 15.
Yeah,
like he's training for it since he was 13.
Yeah. And it's only now he stops for pause and thinks, Jesus, some of these people might be human. Now that I've seen their brains in a tin can. At this point, he's like high up in the...
God, these other humans and I. Yeah. We're not so different after all.
There's a bit of levity, maybe, but there's another quote or letter from...
I feel like it's not going to be, but go on.
No, Sidney Burr, we have his letters from this time, but he received a handkerchief from back home and wrote a returning letter saying, I'm afraid I will not be able to use it here. The old black and tans who were the beginning of this force do not look upon such effeminate apparel in a kindly light. They think the force is going to the dogs as it is. It is because of the soft ways that are creeping into the police that the Arabs are so defiant.
If you use that handkerchief, you won't smash a man's brain in with the butt of your rifle.
Exactly. This place is going to the fucking dogs, and it's things like your handkerchief that are letting them run riot on us. So he has to send his handkerchief back because he's worried the black and tans will think he's too gay to shoot Arabs at point blank range. You're right, it wasn't very funny.
Yeah.
So, but
you mean to tell me that the black and tans weren't LGBTQ plus friendly?
No. It turns out shockingly they were not. But that's the sort of state of affairs in the 1920s and 30s.
But they kept saying that they were allies.
Not that kind of ally. There's an awful lot of conflicts we're going to jump over here. There's obviously the tensions between these groups cause a lot of riots and counter riots, and there's tit-for-tat executions, and there's a lot of stuff around religious use of the religious sites, because again, all the same sites are important for all the religions in the region, and this goes back and forth. We're going to bring this story up until maybe the late 30s, but during this whole period, there's tensions between the groups. Luckily, the steady hand of the RIC is there to make sure no one gets hurt. Now that high-ranking officers have realized that maybe these Arab people are human as well. So into this mix in 1935, who's a man who I think needs probably his own episode, but Chaim Herzog, he moved to Mandatory Palestine in 1935. Born in Belfast, as many were, raised in Portobello, as even more have been. He was the son of Ireland's chief rabbi Yitzhak Levi Herzog, which I've definitely fucked that name up, but he grew up in Portobello. That's why, the Jewish memorial, the Jewish museum is in Portobello. It's in like the same housing estate that he grew up in.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so born in Belfast, raised in Dublin. They all emigrate to Palestine in 1935. Maybe his dad saw the writing on the wall for Northern Ireland. He's like, I think it's going to get a bit hairy here, son. Time for us to tip on over to the new state of Israel. But he ends up joining up with the IDF early on. But basically, the big headline for him is that he becomes president of Israel. He's the 6th president, I believe, of Israel. And his son is the current president of Israel, Isaac Herzog.
Oh.
Yes. So that in all of the... you don't hear that talked about too much.
You're telling me we were on the wrong side this whole time?
We should be doing this story about how the current president of you never even hear anything from him.
No.
And Netanyahu, I guess, is
is their president like our president?
Yeah, I think he is. I don't know what his title is, prime minister probably, or maybe that's just the equivalent they use in Western media, almost definitely. But you never hear much from the president, which is damning in and of itself. So there you go. Isaac Herzog, president of Israel. His dad from Belfast.
Whoa.
That's certainly the takeaway from this episode, but it's interesting.
He was fine when he was leaving Belfast. That's
much like the Titanic. You didn't pick that up here. But is he a Catholic Jew or a Protestant Jew? That's the main question. So anyway, going back to the 30s, there's the series of... Again, there's a lot of Arab revolts, a lot of riots, but in a period from 1936 to 1939, there's an Arab revolt in Palestine. And in the middle of this, there is the Peel Commission. This is going back to the first guy we talked about, but William Peel, to give him his full title, William Robert Wesley Peel, because he is also named after Arthur Wesley.
That's too many now to keep track of.
I think it's maybe 3, but anyway... it's his grandfather we talked about at the start, Robert Peel, the man who set up the Bobbies and the Peelers, set up the RIC, which would eventually become incorporated with the Black and Tans auxiliaries and find their way over to Palestine. His grandson writes the Peel Commission, or comes up with the Peel Commission in 1937, which is it's the thing that splits Israel and Palestine. He forms the states basically in 1903 and 7. He gets a little help from a friend, another proud Irishman, Charles Taggart. If this is another connection that, I don't know, this is another guy you could read an awful lot about, but he's born in Derry. Again, all the documents will say Londonderry. They'll describe him as a sort of the kind of hard-nosed copper that doesn't exist anymore. A beat cop, didn't take no shit. Other people would probably describe him as a tantamount to a war criminal, but what he did in this situation, he'd done a lot of good work in India, in British India, putting down insurrections and stuff there, and the British authorities wanted to turn his hand to Palestine. So I think they want him to give him an official role over there, but he turns it down. But he says he doesn't want a position there, but he'll go over and give his assistance and help them set up the place. And he is responsible for what are referred to as the Taggart forts, which are a series of Martello Tower-like forts, or like the Maginot Line, is it, between France and Germany during the war? Anyway, like this, it's part of the partition, that there's these series of towers, forts, basically, to defend this new partition, this new border they put between the two countries. He's also... Some of them are still in use today. He advised them to set up 77 forts. Eventually, they split the difference and settled on 62 forts. So they are all built throughout Palestine. A few of them on the Lebanese border, but all after the Arab Revolt of 1940-41. So he's also associated with bringing in the Arab investigation centres, which were operated by British authorities in Mandatory Palestine. They are used to detain and interrogate suspected Arab insurgents who were frequently tortured in these facilities.
And that's what they decided to call them.
The Taggart Fort, or what? Arab Investigation Centres.
Yeah.
That's AIC, or backwards, CIA.
CIA.
Yeah, pretty suspicious. But
I would call it something to cover your tracks.
Well, he put his name on the forts.
Yeah, but even like Guantanamo Bay
Yeah.
doesn't sound. It's not like that could just be.
I don't think that they're
It's like
particularly worried
Mar-a-Lago.
about.
That could be anything.
Yeah.
It's just, it is a hellhole, but it could be anything.
Well, he orchestrated. He's part of an infrastructure, I guess, that sets up this. Is part of the Irish legacy that we love. You know, anytime an Irishman does anything bad, especially in a different country, it turns out he was actually British, regardless of where he was born. Much flying in the face of the Good Friday Agreement. But here's a good, strong Derry man who's bringing over his expertise to set up pretty horrendous torture and border security and infrastructure around the place. We're crying out for a hero, I think, at this stage in the story. And what better a man to step into the fray, speak out, speak truth to power. Eamon De Valera. Big Dev steps up to the plate, the League of Nations 1937. He goes and talks about how the Peel Commission is bad. Because if we know one thing about Dev, is that he hates partition. Especially in 1937, which is a time when he's very much against partition. Before he gets Bunrock na Heron, before that's settled away. After that point, he kind of gets, you could take it or leave it. Except when he's out of power, then by God, does he hate partition. He'll go to the ends of the earth to talk about how bad. And he's back in power. It's kind of takes a backseat for a bit. But I've read extracts of his speech. He gets up in front of the League of Nations basically and jokes about like how partition is bad. The Peel Commission shouldn't be listened to.
We shall wade through the blood. Oh no, sorry, different speech. That was wrong page. Wrong.
Yeah, it's in here somewhere. He'll be going through bail in the blow that morning. You should get a clean shot. Nope, that's not the one. He says, the big headline, I suppose, from this is that he says, partition is not the solution. It is the cruelest wrong that could be done any people. That's his petition. He goes on to he splits all the countries of the League of Nations up into pro-Zionist, pro-Arab and in-between groups, which he includes Ireland in, which is a very funny...
Because for a second there I thought you just split them up into two groups, like one of those TikTok trend videos.
Oh yeah. But it sounds like that. He goes through and he's like, everyone's either, you're too pro-Zionist, you're too pro-Arab, you should be like Ireland. He says the in-between groups are France, Ireland, Albania and Haiti. The only countries with a bit of fucking common sense in this bloody League of Nations.
The only reasonable men.
Yeah, So actually, I'm not for either party. My opinion is the right opinion. But, just good to go back into dev again. Now, naturally...
France, we're there with France.
Yeah.
Albania and Haiti.
The big four, as they're called in geopolitical terms. Now, naturally enough, for Dev at the time, in his private writings, he talks a lot about how he's spurred on by his religious reasons he wants Christians to be able to travel to the Holy Land whenever they want.
He wants Mecca for the church.
Yeah, well, but that's pretty much it. That's a good note to leave on, Dev. That's all the numerous Irish connections. There's more, but it's mostly I wanted to talk about it from the point of view of like the overarching policies, like Balfour. He had a big impact on Ireland, big impact on setting up Israel. The Peel family, not so much of an Irish connection, but enough there to fit into the podcast, I reckon. But definitely a lot of the early architects of like British negotiators who were doing the same thing in Ireland, same thing in India, were then put to work in Palestine. And there's a very interesting connection in all of the worst atrocities committed by the Black and Tans and the auxiliaries. Those people were very much sent over to Palestine to set up the police force there. And the police force, whenever that police force pretty much, now a lot of these people would be dead, but in 1948, I believe, when the Israeli police force is set up, it's very much a continuation from the Palestinian police force. So there's a through line between like rabid lunatics roving around, burning down Cork, getting out of Dodge, going to Palestine, setting up institutions which would very much just transition into being the Israeli police force that we know and love today. But yeah, so you get a direct line from a lot of the old RSC Black and Tans officers heading over to Mandatory Palestine. I don't know if we put this down the first time, but in 1922, they reckon 75 to 95% of the new British Palestine gendarmes are former Black and Tans. So as a fair whack of them. There's a lot more figures that we won't have time to talk about who end up moving from the ranks of the Black and Tans into high-ranking police and military positions in early Palestine. But so the last bit we'll talk about, I guess, is we'll go up as far as the 1948 Israel-Palestine War, the Nakba. So basically, in between this is World War II. We're getting to the end of the 30s. You've got Charles Taggart forts are getting built up around the early 40s. So this is I think some of them are still there today. I've seen photos of some of them, but they're like state-of-the-art technology that he's designed purposefully to put borders between Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and then importantly, internally, between what's going to become Israel around about 1937. So he's learned a lot of tricks from putting down revolutions in India. He doesn't want to take a job in Palestine. He doesn't want to be stationed there, but he does lend his expertise. He's there for like a couple of years and gives them a lot of advice about how to set this thing up. He designs the forts. They're having an issue where they can't get enough barbed wire to build the forts. Or he has a dream, I guess, as to how much barbed wire he wants. It's too much barbed wire for them to get from any British companies.
These are state of the art.
Yeah.
But also, you're like, we need more barbed wire.
Yeah, well, barbed wire is the sharpest barbed wire. Well, they look around the world at the time and they figure if it can't be British made, get it from Mussolini's Italy. So he's they get some barbed wire from over there. He's also instrumental in setting up. Well, his recommendation, basically, he wants to set up different police sections in like the hill countries where he reckons the Arab rebels are. So he wants to send specific police forces up there. He describes the sort of person he's looking for as the tough type of man, not necessarily literate. So a special kind of British serviceman that he wants to. So this is the sort of.
Also, it sounds like a stupid idea. It's the same as like the guerrilla warfare kind of tactics of Ireland, how it wouldn't necessarily work for them. It's like, let's send up the British men who've never been to the hills.
Oh yeah,
to find the guys who are from the hills.
Yeah, but all like again, this is. You couldn't have created a worse situation if you tried. I understand this is a very difficult situation to kind of unsolve, that you've several very distinct groups all in one region who all have, in their own minds, legitimate kind of strong claims to there. Yeah. And whatever you think about, like, the original formation of the state in 1917, at this point, it's already happened. There's a lot of people there. World War II is happening. I think we can all largely agree. That's bad.
You're going to say we can all largely agree it happened.
It happened. The Holocaust, very bad. you're at the tail end of that. Like, you'd imagine this is the one time you'd like to think, maybe this is just too naive, that the right people with the right effort could have made this work. And, you know, we did a lot of this sort of stuff in the David Simon episode. We talked about the North, and there's a kind of idea that like these people can't coexist together, which seems, I don't know. I don't think that that's true. But you've got people like Taggart. If the attitude of the time is like, let's get the dumbest, thickest, blood hungriest cops that we have and send them up into the hills. So there's no ideas of like get them to speak Arabic, get them to like. There's no attempts to.
Who needs Arabic when you've got the low ground?
Get the fire up into the high ground. It's actually pretty effective, and they just. Maybe I'm like cherry picking bits as I'm going through this, but everything I've read about them, like they don't seem like reasonable men who are in charge of, again, admittedly, an extremely difficult, sensitive like area to be trying to organize. To try and get all these things right would have been very, very difficult, but I don't even think they get close. Like they go completely the other direction. All the stories I'm hearing are just them like opening fire on, like, and to be fair, on both sides, like the Jewish population, that guy Duffer we were talking about earlier on, he ends up getting fired because of the Jewish cohorts that basically getting fired because they think they'd set up a religious monument along the Wailing Walls during one of the days, and it's they're too long in his estimation, so he like goes down and fucks it into a ravine, which they're not happy about. But and you know, the Wailing Wall is like a religious area for all the multiple groups that are in the region, so you would need a very learned, educated, to balance this whole these multiple different groups. Yeah, whereas instead it's just this fucking
or just literate
half-drunk man who just only realized that Arab people might be human recently enough, and he's just going down. There's a great quote from him. Where at some point he's, you know, there's a Jewish demonstration in a part of Jerusalem, and tensions are getting high. There's an angry crowd, so they send Duff and some of the boys down to sort it out. At this point, Duff is. It is after the Wailing Wall incident, so the Jewish population in particular are very angry at him. So they're like, right, you stay in the van, don't let anyone see you, or else this whole thing will kick off. He doesn't like that, so instead he kicks the door open. He charges out yelling. He also has a whip. I forgot to mention that in the earlier part, but he's essentially styled himself. Indiana Jones is probably styled after this guy. He's wearing a massive hat and he has a whip and a revolver. And this is from his own telling of the story, but he says
it was definitely worse in
real
life.
So this is what he says about it.
He's making himself the hero of this story.
He's told to, you know, relax, don't show yourself. Like these people will go nuts. Instead, he jumps out of the back of a van with his whip, just fucking swirling it around. He says, once again I experienced that strange and utterly sublime ecstasy of going berserk, as my barbarian forefathers had done. I had no consciousness of what it was I was doing as I sprang at that crowd. And, you know, this is the hero of the piece. So, like, these are the men that are involved in trying to, you know, balance this almost extremely difficult task.
Yeah. What happens to him in the end?
I don't know. He probably lives to 95 and retires and
goes to Valhalla.
Yeah. He's still there now, some say, firing off random shots into crowds of citizens. But and like he's not. He's one of the more interesting ones from the point of view that there's a lot written about him. Like he's written a lot, so you can kind of follow his story. But there's an awful lot of people who seem quite similar from the same sort of stock, who end up in these high ranking positions in Palestine. But so a good bit of some of this stuff came from an article or a paper by Matthew Hughes from Brunel University called "The Repression of the Arab Revolt in Palestine between 1936 and 1939." So he talks about in that up until 1947, the Crown was immune from prosecution. Oh. So if any of these citizens had any issue with how the police were acting, you couldn't take it out on the police force, but you could sue individual soldiers. That was your sort of recourse. And with all the stuff we've talked about and all the stuff that, you know, was happening there, he says that he only found one successful prosecution of a serviceman in Palestine of the whole period. And that was when 4 British police officers blatantly executed an Arab prisoner in the street in October of 1938, witnessed by a number of non-British European residents, not importantly, not Arabs, and they complained, and that's how those guys got prosecuted. That's the only incident.
But all 4 of them, it was not just one of them?
He says one successful prosecution maybe means like one incident with the 4 of them, but
all 4 of them got it.
I'm not sure.
Hopefully.
But that's it, yeah. But I mean, so it takes to executing a man in the streets, and only because it's witnessed by non-British European residents.
Yeah.
And that's
you didn't go down because you did it.
Yeah.
You went down because you got caught.
Yeah. And then shortly after that, so the last bit we'll talk about, this is the kind of end of Mandatory Palestine. After World War II, the British are getting out of Palestine. They reckon, what more can we do? Job done. We've sent our best, drunkest, most illiterate, bloodthirsty, whip-yielding, berserk officers that we could find. Really, at this point, if you can't set up a functioning country, it's on you, really. You can't hold their hands forever. But
look, we tried.
They tried their best. They leave at the same time. Israel declares itself a sovereign state, May 14th, 1948. So this period is referred to, depending on where you read it, as there's the Israel-Palestine War, the Palestine War, the Israeli War of Independence. It's a period of about 10 months where Israel declares itself a sovereign state. The British leave the area the next day. The armies of Jordan, Syria, and Egypt all attack this new Israeli state, along with, I think, some soldiers from Iraq and Lebanon. So this is, as soon as the British are gone, everyone moves into attack. And this goes on for about 10 months. And it kind of sets up, during this period as well, from the Palestinian point of view, they refer to it as the Nakba, or the first Nakba, which I believe translates into the catastrophe. But it's a big moment in
it's the one they're always referencing, saying since the formation of this state we've been under fire.
Yeah, this is like day one stuff. Israel sets up as a state. There's a big war for about 10 months, and the end result is massively damaging for Palestine in particular. But the last Irish connection is that during that period, or leading up to the Nakba, the High Commissioner of Palestine, British High Commissioner of Palestine, Alan Cummings, a Dublin man. Just one last kick into it. Now, to be fair, as all I could find is that he was born in Dublin. His dad is Scottish, and he didn't really spend much time here because he was busy, the same as most of the people in this story, headed off to India to do some, put down some rebellions there. But yeah, so not much of a connection there, but just one last funny...
A kicker.
It's just a
sting
kicker
in the tail.
Yeah.
Just get one more Irish involvement.
Yeah. So that's kind of, from this point on now, Israel is a sovereign state, and this is a moment. One interesting thing, I kind of said this to you about, we're both men in our early 30s, which means that we both love Michael Lewis. Moneyball, The Big Short, great stuff. Years ago I read his book, The Undoing Project, and I really liked it. I remembered it being about like 2 Israeli scientists who help set up, it's a study of like heuristics. It's about different fields being exposed to different biases, and kind of how humans interpret information and how we misinterpret it, and how your own biases can lead to corruption of data, stuff like that. That's how I remembered the story. I started rereading it again this year, or I started listening to the audiobook of it again this year. I forgot how much of it is like that's the main story, but about 40% of the story is about how they set up the IDF. So most of the story is about how they're studying heuristics, but they keep taking breaks from that to go fight in various like Israeli wars. And I had to stop listening to it because it was just too bleak. But one of the more bizarre things in that book that I haven't seen anyone pick up on, I don't know how popular that book was, but there's a line in it where he's describing, and again, this book is about like biases and misinterpreting data and stuff like that. In it, when he's talking about this, how they phrase it, they say, the War of Independence lasted for 10 months. A Jewish state that was the size of Connecticut before the war wound up a bit bigger than New Jersey. 1% of the Israeli population had been killed, the equivalent of 90,000 dead in New Jersey. 10,000 Arabs had died, and 750,000 Palestinians were displaced. So that's how he describes it.
But that's how many people actually...
So if you look up
don't say the number. Don't use that. If you're going to say the number of Arabs, say the number of...
Exactly. It's not an equivalency. And when you look up 1% of the Israeli population, it's about, so they reckon it's about 6,000 Israelis killed.
And 8,000 Arabs.
10,000.
Sorry, 10,000.
But instead of saying
Yeah.
Instead of saying 6,000 Israeli killed and 10,000 Arabs, he says 1%, which is the equivalent of 90,000 dead in New Jersey.
That'd be a great example of bias.
That's a great example of just fucking completely misrepresenting you. I don't know. That's not... It's insane.
He's a piece of shit anyway.
I've started and then all the other stuff you hear about The Blind Side.
Yeah, with Michael Oher.
And he got. I wasn't really following the Sam Bankman-Fried stuff. But I see him get a lot of flack.
He got a lot of shit for that because he rode hard in there behind him right until the end, when it became very apparent that guy was basically just using it was like a Ponzi scheme.
Sure.
And he was like, no, he's fine. And then he wrote a book. And so he was writing the book about... Sam Bankman-Fried is the guy behind the FTX crypto disaster.
And Lewis was spending this whole time with him right up until Bankman got... busted.
Yeah. And then everyone knew he was writing the book about him.
Yes.
And then so about 80% of the way into the book, writing it, that all of this came out. And everyone expected then, obviously the book will change. Yeah. And instead, he just kind of goes, he's kind of a good guy.
Yeah.
And then came out and started talking shit about the other guy who wrote a book that was actually trying to be honest about it.
Which is also very similar to what he's done with, and I haven't seen The Blind Side, but I've read a bit about... Who's the footballer?
Michael Oher.
Michael, so it's similar to what he's done there, I guess.
Yeah, well, so in fairness to him, that the book in that is not as bad as the film, but it is based off of
but Michael Oher's come out and said, like, I've been misrepresented by this, and Lewis is very much sided with the family the whole time.
Who he went to, the family who was $100 million of a net worth, and he was high school friends or college friends with the father, or the adopted father. Actually, not an adopted father, a conservative.
Yes, because they never actually adopted him.
And even though they could have legally adopted him, because in Tennessee you're allowed to adopt people over the age of 18, but they told Michael that, this is basically an adult adoption, and then they just took charge of his life, and then basically as a way to, I don't know if this is true or not, almost 100%, because they're boosters or just backers for the Old Miss University, so he could go play football there. Horrible pieces of shit. And then they continued to, for the rest of, for years and years, they were putting it on their website, in books that they wrote about how they adopted him, even though they had the chance to do that, didn't, and then didn't give him any of the profits from The Blind Side.
Yeah. It's, I don't want to...
Even though their kids, who were only side characters in it, were both given big enough payouts and 2.5% of the net profits of the film. Michael wasn't given any of that. I would imagine that Michael Lewis is probably one of the worst people to write a book about bias. Actually, maybe he's one of the best. He's so biased in all of his writings.
Yeah, and now I don't want to finish up this episode about Palestine making Michael Lewis the bad guy though. So
fair, make Sam Bankman-Fried the bad guy.
Yeah. But it's this kind of I don't know. It's an interesting tie-in, because this kind of misrepresentation of that. I remember one story in particular, where an Israeli soldier was killed in a landmine attack, I think, and all the stories were like, he was 19, he was just a boy, but for the previous year running the stories, the same sort of news outlets, or certainly the same sort of stuff you'd see online, would be like, well, if they're 13 and in Palestine, they're in Hamas. I mean, that's just, I've seen people argue a lot of the stats, like it's like a huge percentage of the people being killed in Gaza are children.
Yeah.
But people kind of fudge the numbers by claiming that anyone preteen and up is not actually a child, but a Hamas soldier. But if you're 19 and killed, driving around a tank,
you're
just a boy. You didn't know. But
unless you're in Tennessee, then you can still adopt.
But there's loads of different...
I want to read all of his stats now, because that feels... The New Jersey one is crazy. Because you could have said that it was like, by that token, you could go, 10,000 Arabs were dead. It was like, if you look at that as the population of Faroe Islands...
Yeah.
They killed an entire nation.
And you could easily put it up like that. And, the end result is, this is a... You hear about the Nakba a lot, I guess, in Palestinian discourse, and this is kind of the, 350,000 people out of their homes, and it's the start of what people would say is an ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. And at this stage, it's pretty... I mean, they're clearly trying to kill everyone in the region. Well, look, and they have been for
it's been said by multiple organizations. It's the people who are in charge of using the G word have said it, they've labelled it a genocide. And it would definitely appear to be that way, because they're not allowing any aid in, and they're continuing to bomb places like hospitals.
Yeah, for sure. They've been stopping aid for years now. Facilities are still being turned away. They've been bombing hospitals. I mean...
And then when aid goes back to help those hospitals, they bomb it again.
Yeah. And
I don't know if did it become apparent over the space of the episode? I suppose we did probably make it a couple of jokes.
Yes.
We don't.
Yeah, we're I don't know if we've been bad about it online, mostly because we're just bad at being online. And I don't know, we don't really post much stuff about anything, but like Israel is bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not fans.
No, and they have... I want to do this episode anyway, just for... Because I think it's interesting. I think maybe for our listeners outside of Ireland, people in Ireland, you might have heard this stuff before. There's a lot of interesting connections, but people outside of Ireland in particular may kind of wonder why... I've seen a lot of stuff early on where people were... I remember in Trinity, they were protesting maybe a year ago, and a lot of the comments were like, they're all into this now until, the next fad comes along. And I think people maybe underestimate how long the Irish support for Palestine has been going on in this country. And a lot of it, again, is kind of this stuff. It's the same origin story.
Yeah. Ukrainians, these Johnny come latelys.
Yeah.
This one goes.
Honestly, there's more connections between Palestine than Ireland and Ukraine. Not that it's a competition, but
some people would make it feel like that.
I know, but more. I'm just saying that it's not like I think from the outside maybe it feels like this is just something that Irish people have randomly latched onto. But it's the same building blocks for our country, and the black and tans is a big one, and like it is a big percentage of people of black and tan officers who go over to Palestine. But I mean the connections have been there for a long time, and I forgot. I don't think I mentioned this at the start about. Do you remember the dates of this? I remember Dundalk FC when they were in the heydays, when they were getting into Europa League. They kept getting fined for flying Palestine flags. Who were they fined? Tel Aviv? Maybe they weren't even.
I don't think it was even.
I think that was. I don't even think they were Israeli teams.
Possibly though, it could have been Maccabi.
I think because they were in the same league, they kept flying Palestine flags at matches and getting fined, and then they just raised money to pay the fine before going to do the next match.
A whip round.
Yeah. But anyway, listen, that is our episode about Palestine. If you have any questions or comments, apparently you can comment on Spotify, which we only realized the other day.
Yeah, you went back and a handful of comments.
A handful of comments and notes.
And some of those comments you can keep to yourself.
But some of them, let us know. Well, if we missed anything or you want to add anything into the Palestine episode, email us at shouttalkhistory@gmail.com or message us on Instagram, where we're not posting anything, but we will soon again. But anyway, there you go. That's a brief overview of the Irish-Palestinian connections. Right, that's the end of the episode. Good luck.
Shafter.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.